Hey everyone, ConeCar here, and I am back in real life video. Like I mentioned in this month's monthly update video, I had something else that I needed to make a real life video about this month, and this is that. I am currently in the last ride of the milfmobile. That's right, the daily driver of the past 2 years for me is on its way to get traded in for the new ConeCar for 2017, the new old ConeCar. This is something I've actually been working on for the past 6 months or so, and it was something that I desperately wanted to do before the trip to PAX, but it didn't quite work out that way because the vehicle that I have been hunting for has been extremely hard to find. There's a group of people that know what I've been looking for, but overall I've tried to keep it pretty hush-hush. Most certainly the patrons on Discord know all too well what I've been looking for, and I've quite possibly been driving them crazy about it. But even say my parents do not know what I've been looking for, and I've been driving them crazy, not letting them know, and giving them just, little teasers, little hints as to what it would be. I think my dad seems to be convinced that it's a BMW, and my mom seems to be convinced that it is another Pontiac. But rather than egg you on that kind of stuff, I did just want to kind of go over the Solstice, because I was very passionate about finding this car as well when I was car hunting, and I certainly wouldn't say that it disappointed me. It actually, in general, surprised me more than it disappointed me, like the good kind of surprised. This is the first car that I have owned that, was made in the 21st century. It took 9 cars to get there. It's the first domestic car I've ever owned. It's the first turbocharged car I've ever owned. And if you're just stumbling upon this video and have no idea who I am, or what this is a 2007 Pontiac Solstice GXP, which means it's a, here, have a link to the actual review of the car that I did. The transmission is clunkier than a Chevy Colorado's. Actually, no, it's exactly as clunky as a Chevy Colorado's because it is a Chevy Colorado transmission. The core thing, the number one quality of this vehicle that makes it difficult to own is the fact that it is quite possibly the least practical vehicle ever made in the history of time. It's an amazingly impractical vehicle, which is one of the things that makes me like it. I like cars that are designed and built for no other reason than to be driven, and I would say that's very much so the philosophy behind this car. I personally have not driven any GM cars, say 2010 plus. I've ridden in a few of the newer trucks, but they aren't exactly a perfect example of, where they're going or what their status is now. But holy cow, if they have not improved on build quality since this era, I have no idea how they are still in business. And it's blindingly obvious why they went bankrupt through vehicles like this. And its siblings. Like this car shares a lot with the Cobalt, and it shares a lot with like the HHR, stuff like that. Overall, this car is what you could describe as a parts bin car. Somebody had an idea at GM to make, a new small sports roadster, but they either didn't have the money or they didn't want to spend the money on actually engineering one. So instead, they drew up a plan for it and then said, okay, how many pieces from another Lego set could we, put together to make this car work? The upside to that is that they could do it pretty cheaply. The downside is it feels and drives, and just the tactile feel of the car, the noises it makes, the groans, the creaks, the stuff like that. It's like a knockoff Connect set. Connects were a pain in the butt, but they were so cool that, you know, you took the time to put together that roller coaster. But you know, if it's a knockoff one and it feels like crap when you're done, well then it's probably not as worth it then. And if I had bought this car new, I would be super disappointed with it, because this was a $39,000 car, I believe, MSRP. It had every option on it, you know, everything you could get besides a spoiler. That was the only option that was not ticked on this car, which was 3. If I had paid $39,000 for this car and this is the quality that it was, I might have been disappointed. The part that's not disappointing and the part that makes that almost worth it is when you put your foot down and the car goes. This is the fastest car I've ever owned, and I think anybody that has ridden in it or driven it has been shocked at the quickness that this car proceeds to go at. The handling is very, very good. I'm sad that I never got the chance to autocross this car, because I have a feeling it would be absolutely fantastic. And if you're looking for an $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 autocross car, pick one of these up, because I have a feeling it's going to be really, really good. The maintenance might be hard, but I think it would be a car that you would find to be extremely competitive. So it's been good, though. It's been fun. I've enjoyed owning it. I've enjoyed enlightening people about it. That's something I always like to do with my cars. You know, it's more like adopting a pet for me than it is owning a car. I like people's reactions. This car, not as much as like the MR2s that I've owned. People just love those cars. I love seeing those cars. It's a reason I enjoy driving the Supra around, is that people just loved seeing that car. These, I think, were extremely misrepresented, or people didn't pay them much attention or much respect, because, you know, especially with all the crap that GM went through right at the era that Pontiac went under and all that stuff, they just got a very bad rap for a car that is an amazing performer, if you can put up with the fact that it's extremely chintzy. It's chintzy in all of the build quality ways, but amazing in most of the engineering ways. So I think that's enough tearing apart the poor Solstice. It's served us very well. It only cost me $1,000 water pump repair. And it was a good first foray into having a car loan, having a car that is, you know, modern. It's my first adult car. I maybe went a little too far into the adult thing and got a retiree's car. But no, yeah, it's done very well. But now it's time to move on. And I'm excited for basically doing the same thing with this next car. All right, here we are inside the new ConeCar, the worst kept secret in all of internet history. Most of you guys already knew what it was I was looking for. I intentionally left quite a few clues out there, including many in the Forza Horizon series. But if you haven't figured it out yet, this is an Audi TT. I feel pretty confident that there's a large amount of viewers out there, especially, I would say, any of my European fans that just went, huh? Because this is not a car that has a particularly fantastic reputation in the automotive world. But you know what? I seem to be drawn to vehicles like that. The Solstice itself was a vehicle that a lot of people were like, what? And yeah, I really like quirky cars that may not be perfect in the ways automotive journalists really appreciate, but in ways that I appreciate. So before I get too far into defending it, this is a 2008 Audi TT Quattro 3.2. This car was extremely difficult to find because most of the Audi TTs made or brought to the United States come with the 4-cylinder engine, and that 4-cylinder engine, which is a 2.0 turbo, A, has a terrible reputation of being an unreliable mess, and B, only comes with a dual clutch transmission. This car comes with a 6-speed manual. That was the key selling point. I wanted something more refined than the Solstice, a little bit more practical. It has way more usable space inside of it, and had to be a manual. The very first car that started this search was the Volkswagen R32 Golf. So those cars were VR6, they were small hatchbacks, two-door hatchback, like not this kind of hatchback, but like, you know, the wagon style hatchback. There's a weird distinction there, isn't there? But that was quickly dispelled because, at least in America and maybe globally, no manuals, dual clutch only. I got nothing against dual clutches. I know they're a very fantastic technology. It's the fastest shifting you'll ever do, way better than traditional automatics. I get it, I understand it, I don't like them. I just can't get on board with the dual clutch stuff. I drove a 2010 TTS, I believe, that was a 2.0 turbo DCT, and I fell in love with the car, but I hated the engine, and I really, really hated the transmission. Maybe it's not even a good DCT, I'm not sure. It's very fast to shift, but in any mode besides, you know, manual shifting, it was abysmal. Like, just could not figure out what the heck to do for gears, and it just wasn't an enjoyable experience for me. So I found out that in 2008, in the United States of America, you could get a 3.2 VR6 with a manual for that year and half of 2009 only. By my numbers, there is less than 2,000 of these in existence. Half of those are convertibles, which are hideous and I did not want, and half of those would be dual clutch. Did I say manuals before? I meant 3.2s in general. Not a ton of these 3.2s were sold over here. So it ended up being a rather rare car. I have a friend of mine who is a used car salesman. His specialty is in internet sales, and he took on this challenge. He took on the challenge of every day browsing auctions, looking for one of these to come up, and we missed out on two that were very nice cars, but one ended up just not being able to be obtained, and the other ended up that it went a little outside my price range. This car handles amazing, I will say that. You probably just heard a bunch of stuff rattle around in the car, but we'll get into more of that stuff later. This road is extremely bumpy, so it's going to get noisy, I'm sorry. The challenge was finding it. This car, he came to me with about 20-minute notice. Hey, I found one. I've got to get it right now if we're going to get it. And my restrictions were, I would like it to be in the like 60,000 mile and under range, and it had to be less than $20,000. Well, this car came up. It is a 2008. It is a manual. It has every single option you could get on this car, but it had 91,000 miles on it. So I was at work at the moment that he told me this, and I was just like, oh God, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And he was like, it's a risk. It's sure as hell a risk, but I'm going to get this car for a steal because of the way it was being obtained. So I took the chance and said, go for it. I mean, it had a very clean Carfax, it had service history, it was a Audi certified used, so it had a lot of good things going for it. The bad things were that we had very little information, very few pictures, and yeah, it was purely a risk. I'll tell you, I paid less than $15,000 for this car, actually pretty far south of $15,000 for this car. The window sticker on this car was over $51,000 in 2008, so holy crap, depreciation, man. Jeez, it's unbelievable. But not to go too in-depth here, too long into the getting of the car, just know it was a struggle. What do I think of it? Was the search worth it? Did I make a mistake? But you know, the biggest part of it was the aspect of like, never meet your heroes, because this exact car I had not driven, I had not seen one in person, and yeah, the car was bought sight unseen too. So quickly through the details here, I'm about to try and find a spot to get some outside footage of the car so you can see it. This is a 08 3.2 liter VR6, which means it's one of those crazy Volkswagen engines that has all 6 cylinders under one head, but they are staggered. They are not inline. Fits in between the front wheels. This is my first vehicle owned that is transverse, not longitudinal. It is all-wheel drive. These are Haldex all-wheel drive cars, which means they are, for 90% of the time, front-wheel drive driven. But then if you need power to the rear wheels, it will send 50% of the power back there using a clutch-style differential. It makes about 245 horsepower and has about the same in torque. It weighs about 3,200 pounds. So right out of the box, it is a slower car than I previously owned. That is for sure. There is no doubt there. It's not slow. It's certainly quick enough for what I use it for, and it doesn't feel like it lacks in power to me. So you remember that spot that I shot the Solstice review video, or some of it? It's now full of houses and a lake, so that's unfortunate. I guess I'm not using this spot anymore. That's the freaking problem with this area. It's so overdeveloped. There's no empty roads. There's nowhere to like get away from society. It's so annoying. So I totally thought I had the AC on the whole time, and I didn't. Oh man, it's so nice having a car with AC. The Solstice had it, but it was broken from the factory. For the 2007 year that I had, the AC compressor bracket was inferior to hold the AC compressor, and what that meant is that the compressor rattles around under load. So if anything, my driving vlogs should be either more frequent or just way more comfortable to do now. A little bit more about the car. It has magnetic ride suspension. That was one of the options that it has. So you can change the shocks to be, you know, normal driving or sport mode, and they stiffen up. It rides smoother than the Solstice. It doesn't ride like a family car, but it rides smoother than the Solstice for sure. And it also had navigation and the premium stereo. All of that pretty lackluster in my opinion. The navigation is not very good, and the stereo is actually, I would say, not insignificantly worse than it was in the Solstice. So kudos to GM and Monsoon for making a very good sound system in that car. But it's kind of the only thing that I've really noticed that is inferior to that car. It's certainly a much better cruiser. The clutch is much easier, the transmission shifts much smoother, the way the steering reacts, everything is just so much easier without being too numb. Like, it's not one of those cars that like doesn't do anything for you. It has no problem getting up and going, and it makes a sound. It's not no 6-cylinder engine, especially V6 or, you know, not inline sixes. make my favorite engine note in the world, that's for sure. But it's not terrible. It's got a nice growl to it. I don't feel the need to put an exhaust system on it, though. I don't think I would like it to be loud. I like that it makes noise, like it makes a growl, but really only when you're really getting on it. It makes a lot of intake noise that I like. Like it has that real good, like you hear the air, you hear it gasp for air when you hit the gas. I like that in a car. I like that in an engine. I like to hear the intake. For a stock airbox, that's pretty unusual. It's extremely comfortable. Oh my God, it's comfortable compared to the Solstice. There's so much more room. The seats are fully adjustable. I'm very comfortable in it. I have tons of room with the steering wheel. The pedals are in very great spots. It's got a very nice dead pedal and stuff like that. The back seat is there for good storage and absolutely nothing else. The hatch has plenty of storage. Tons of headroom with the way the roof has these openings in it. Almost like, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like the bubble roof of like a Viper or something like that, but they only do it in the headliner. It's not visible in the roof panel itself, but it gives you tons of headroom. Slagathor fits in this car very well for I don't know how tall he is. He's a big dude, all right? He's a tall and large individual, so the fact that he fits in it very well was surprising compared to the Solstice, which he was unable to ride in to like make the trip to Texas and stuff like that. So that's really nice. One of the cars that it was assumed to be looking for, some of my local friends and acquaintances kind of assumed that I would be looking for a Subaru, but my experiences with Subarus has not been positive in basically any way. I just don't like the way that they drive. I don't like the way they feel. I don't like the clutches in them very much at all. The transmissions are clunky, and you always feel this like weird power shift going on. This car has none of that. If I just hopped into this car and drove it, I would probably have a hard time telling you if it was front, rear, or all-wheel drive. It just does it very seamlessly. It's honestly nearly impossible to know exactly what kind of drive this thing is until you push it. And when you push it, you could tell it's front-wheel drive. And then when you really push it, you can tell it pushes some power to the rear. I drove around a little bit on the dirt roads of where I grew up, and the all-wheel drive works, and it moves power around, and I can confirm it will send enough power to the rear to get you that feeling of going sideways. So it can at least do that. Other than that, I mean, yeah, it's a nice sports coupe. It drives nice, it looks cool, I like the way it looks a lot. It's got a spoiler that goes up and down. What's not to like? What's not to like? I think it will serve us very well as the new ConeCar daily driver. And I don't know if there will be really update videos on it. I'm doing some fixing up on it. It had cracked headlight housings where a previous owner had installed LEDs along the headlights. If you're somebody that does that, don't do that. Don't be that person. Don't be that guy, all right? Yeah, just some overall tidying up. This will be a car that I will have to be very conscious of maintenance on. I was okay with this car because I drive so little. To give you just an idea of how little I drive at this point, I put 8,000 miles on the Solstice in 2 years. So that's not very much. So in 2 years, we probably won't even be hitting 100,000 miles in this thing unless I get to do a lot of traveling. But if I'm going to do that, I need to do things like getting the timing chain maintenance, and in that, probably having the clutch looked at. The clutch feels amazing. It has a listed clutch history at 60,000, so it might be fine. We'll have to see. But yeah, I want to keep on up with this thing. This feels like a car that feels worth doing that stuff versus the Solstice never did. Like doing the water pump on the Solstice felt like miserable to me, because it just, even at that point, didn't feel like a car that was worth the $1,000 investment to keep it going, to keep it updated and fresh. So far, this car does, and I think one of the reasons is that there's so few of them. It's not, at least in this area, a car I see at all. I've still yet to see, in the time that I've been looking, another 3.2 coupe at all in person. So it's cool to have something that you don't see every day. It's cool that it's so far just absolutely satisfying all of my needs, and yeah, I want it to stick around.